Okay.
on the small intestine, yes, bacterial overgrowth. We're all ears.
بس I'm doing بس share screen مش عارفة ايه المشكلة.
You have problems in transmission? Okay.
احنا طبعا لحد بس ما دكتوره ايثار يا دكتور تشير السكرين. احنا دي الويف 7 من الاديوكيشنال وساينتفك كورس من اسم تروبيكال ميديسين عين شمس.
Yes.
طبعا ان شاء الله الاستمراريه بوجود اساتذتنا الافاضل وزملائنا كلهم وكل القائمين على يعني الماده العلميه اللي بتقدم، وربنا ان شاء الله يجعله علم نافع كده يا دكتور، وربنا يحفظ حضراتكم جميعا. تمام يا دكتوره ايثار؟ تمام كده؟
تمام. بس هي كده السكرين عايزه تتظبط مش كده؟
لا هي كده انت لو عاملاها PDF بروسيد.
Yeah, looks great. Yes.
Sorry for
لا خلاص.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's a clinical syndrome of GI symptoms caused by the presence of excessive number of bacteria within the small intestine. So it's an overgrowth, not only the presence of bacteria, because our alimentary tract normally is colonized by bacteria shortly after birth. And its composition remains relatively constant throughout life because of a lot of physiologic mechanisms limits the number of bacteria in the proximal intestine to very low number. Even if we do jejunal culture, it will not detect bacteria in up to 33% of healthy people. So as we go distal to the colon, the number increase and the composition of bacteria differ. So the question here, why we have bacteria in our alimentary tract? The bacteria has a lot of functions, as it produces vitamin K, folic acid. Also, the undigested dietary sugar is converted by bacterial disaccharidase into short-chain fatty acids, and it's an energy source for our colonic mucosa. Also, some drugs as sulfa is converted to its active form by the bacterial flora. A problem here is the overgrowth of bacteria, not the presence of bacteria in our small intestine. The pathophysiology, that a lot of number of mechanisms, physiologic mechanisms limit the bacterial growth. Breakdown of one or more of these mechanisms will lead to accumulation of bacteria in the small intestine. So the bacteria overgrow and proliferate, result in mucosal injury. mucosal injury will lead to loss of the main function of this small intestine, where is the absorption. So malabsorption occurred. Malabsorption of carbohydrates as injury of the brush border of the mucosa, malabsorption of fat as the bacteria deconjugate the bile salt, leading to impaired muscle formation and fat malabsorption and steatorrhea. Also protein losing entropy. So we lost all the major macronutrients of our food. Also the bacteria consume vitamin B12, any available vitamin B12, lead to deficiency of vitamin B12. However, the bacteria, as we mentioned before, produce folic acid, so folate will be normal or will not deficient in these patients. The mechanisms for physiologic mechanism to guard against overgrowth of bacteria. The most important is gastric acid and the small intestinal motility. Gastric acid, most ingested bacteria in food cannot survive because the high acidic media of the stomach. Pancreatic enzymes digest food, so no enough nutrients left for the bacteria. And also digest bacterial products. Bile acids act as detergents. Small bowel motility, especially the migrating motor complex اللي هي الفاس 3 اللي هي بتحصل وقت الفاستنج during fasting. The small intestine has peristaltic movement and mainly in the fasting stage, but in the feed state it is mixing or segmentation contraction to mix food with digestive enzymes. The migrating motor complex cleans and sweeps all the debris from the small intestine. So it is very important physiologic mechanism to overcome any growth of bacteria. Also, the ileocecal valve prevent retrograde movement of the colonic flora into the small bowel, plus the immune system, the mucosal integrity help to maintain a stable microbiota of the intestinal lumen. طيب يبقى هي ايه conditions اللي هتبقى موجوده في حاله small intestinal bacterial overgrowth؟ يعني هو ايه underlying cause اللي هيعمل المشكله دي؟ ان احنا هنعمل disruption or breakdown of these mechanisms. يبقى هنعمل مثلا small intestinal stasis or any anatomical abnormalities like small intestinal diverticulosis, any surgical procedures leave blind loop syndrome, strictures, whatever from Crohn's disease, radiation, or after surgery, or affection of the small intestinal motility, neuropathy or myopathy, diabetic autonomic neuropathy, scleroderma, hypothyroidism, any disease affect the motility of small intestine. Also, if we remove the ileocecal valve, whatever in a surgical procedure, there is become abnormal communication between proximal and distal gastrointestinal tracts. Other diseases has a lot of mechanisms to cause SIBO, like liver disease or celiac disease. It's mostly an association that patients with liver disease has portal hypertension and intestinal dysbiosis, leading to small spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, hepatic encephalopathy. It's linked to these patients. Celiac disease patients also, if they have failure to respond to the gluten-free diet, if we eradicate SIBO, they will improve. It will improve their GI symptoms. Irritable bowel syndrome also linked to SIBO, and Studies found that a lot of patients, up to 70% of patients, have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Maybe it's linked to their antibiotic intake and so on. Chronic pancreatitis also has a lot of mechanisms. Intestinal dysmotility. This patient has deficiency of pancreatic enzymes, and these patients also took narcotics, which lead to hypomotility of the small intestine. Immunodeficiency, mucosal barrier is breakdown. So as in AIDS, elderly also has decrease in gastric acidity. They also has hypomotility and a lot of drugs intake. Type clinical picture. SIBO has no specific clinical picture, so we must rely on the underlying cause, search for the risk factor in the patient. When you evaluate any patient or suspect that patient has SIBO, no single symptom can be specifically attributed to SIBO. الساين symptoms زي ما قلنا إن هي arise من malabsorption والinflammation والmucosal injury of the small intestine. The most common symptom هو الابdominal bloating. ليه؟ علشان البكتيريا هتعمل fermentation of the ingested carbohydrates. Will lead to bloating, gas production, mainly hydrogen gas and methane gas, leading to abdominal bloating, cramping, abdominal pain, nausea, flatulence, distension, diarrhea, or constipation. If it is more severe, it will lead to malabsorption of all our nutrients, lead to steatorrhea, weight loss, anemia, and deficiency mainly in the fat soluble vitamins. Okay, we suspect SIBO in the patient, so we need to test for SIBO. How to test for SIBO? First, we have the duodenal or jejunal aspirate. It is the gold standard. Bacterial colony count of more than 10 to the power 3 colony forming unit per milliliter in duodenal or jejunal aspirate is diagnostic for SIBO. But we have here a problem. Although it is a gold standard test, it has several limitations. Mainly, number one, for that, the risk of contamination by the oropharyngeal bacteria during the procedure itself. You must use sterile instruments and inform the microbiology lab that to describe the growth of bacteria by colony count, not only positive or negative. Other thing that the bacterial growth may be patchy, so or more distal, so out of reach of the upper endoscopy. A single aspirate cannot detect or may miss the bacterial growth. Culture also, most of the gut flora are not culturable. So this test has low reproducibility if we compare it with the another test اللي هو breath test. breath test طبعا ميزته ان هو non invasive and easy. ايه هو الدايجنوزس؟ هيبقى ازاي ان احنا نعمل measurement of exhaled hydrogen gas on breath with a rise of at least 20 parts per million above baseline within 90 minutes of oral ingestion of a carbohydrate substrate, whatever glucose or lactulose. او ان احنا to detect a concentration of methane level more than 10 parts per million at any point during the test. But it is diagnostic for methanogen colonization, not for bacteria. This is a problem or in the nomenclature. The methanogens are not bacteria, are archaea. هي يعني primitive prokaryotes وإنها بتبقى مختلفة شوية في السيل ممبرين عن البكتيريا، وليها ديفرنس ثانية عن البكتيريا. المهم إن هي تبقى هنا diagnosis أو إن إحنا الصح إن إحنا نقول إن هي نيو تيرم تاني اسمه intestinal methanogen overgrowth IMO. الميثانوجينز أو اللي هي الاركي لينكد لإيه؟ إن هي بتطلع لنا الميثان جاز، والستاديز فاوند ذات الميثان جاز بيعمل إيه؟ بيأثر على الكولينرجيك نيورونز، وممكن يعمل لنا ديلاي في البريستالسيس، ديلاي في الإيليال بريستالسيس، وده ممكن يعمل لنا كونستيبيشن. فهي لينكد اكتر للكونستيبيشن، ولينكد اكتر لان هي مش بتعمل بلوتنج وجازس ونفس الاعراض بس مع اكتر الكونستيبيشن. اكتر ميثانوجين موجوده، هي اكتر واحده تبقى موجوده اللي هي الميثانو بريفي بكتر سميث appears to the key methanogen responsible for breath methane production. طيب ايه هي البرنسبل بتاعت البريث تيست؟ اللي هو الهيدروجين production by fermentation of carbohydrates by the overgrowth of bacteria, leading to production of hydrogen and methane gases, which is absorbed to bloodstream and detected by the breath during the test. هو ليه برضو precautions قبل ما نعمله. في foods معينة بتبقى برضو must be avoided as bread, pasta، حاجات كتيرة كانت avoided يعني المفروض في precautions للتست. وبرضو السيجاريت سموكينج، وكان برضو من ضمن الحاجات ان البريث تيست في مشكلة ان هو برضو ممكن يحصل contamination بالاورال بكتيريا، وهي تبقى السورس اوف هيدروجين. يعني هي ليها برضو drawbacks او disadvantages. هنا عشان بس افرق ما بين سيبو والايمو او small intestinal bacterial overgrowth والintestinal methanogen overgrowth. دي بكتيريا لكن دي اركي، وان هي ديت لينكد اكتر بالكونستيبيشن، لكن السمول انتستاينال بكتيريا اوفر جروث دايريا اور بلوتنج، او ممكن كونستيبيشن بس اكتر تبقى مع دايريا. ده زي interpretation of the results عشان نشوف ازاي بنعمل interpretation. لو احنا قلنا اللي هو ال continuous line ده اللي هو الهيدروجين، والdotted one اللي هو الميثان. فنمبر A عندنا الهيدروجين لاين ده هيكون elevated، هو عند 90 minutes elevated more than 20، فهنا ده positive for hydrogen for SIBO. graph number B هيكون for الميثانوجينز اللي هم الintestinal methanogen overgrowth. C, this is a normal, no elevation in both. طيب هو بس ازاي نعمل ابلكيشن بقى؟ ان احنا الاي سي جي practical clinical guidelines 2020 they recommended the use of breath test. امتى بقى؟ في مين؟ اول حاجه patients with IBS، زي ما قلنا ان هم about 70 or 78% are suffering from SIBO. symptomatic patient with suspected motility disorders، يبقى هنا انا بشوف السيمبتومز اللي هي non specific مع ال underlying clinical cause. أو symptomatic patients وعنده previous liminal abdominal surgery، وهي دي كلها برضو conditional recommendations very low level of evidence. برضو suggest بالنسبة للميثانوجينز ميثان using glucose or lactulose breath test to diagnose the overgrowth of methane producing organisms in symptomatic patients with a constipation. زي ما قلنا إن هي more مع ال constipating patients. طيب انا عملت تيست للسيبو، برضو هنعمل برضو investigations عشان الكومبليكيشنز وعشان الاندرلاين كوز. يعني for example vitamin deficiency، فنشوف فيتامين B12 which is the most ان هو يبقى consumed. هيبقى عندنا ماكروسيتيك انيميا، بس ممكن برضو يبقى في مايكروسيتيك عشان في iron deficiency ممكن يحصل. ونشوف الستول ايفالويشن، يعني كل الانفستيجيشنز فور malabsorption. طيب وكمان الايميجينج ده عشان نشوف اي structural abnormalities of the small intestine. بالنسبه للتريتمنت، اول حاجه التريتمنت هي 2 بوينتس. اول حاجه هتبقى ان انا الاصل المين هو to treat the underlying cause. لو في اي abnormality ممكن اصلحها كستراكشرال او whatever، يبقى لازم ان انا اصلحها. طب I can't if I couldn't do this، يبقى هنعمل ايه؟ هندي الانتي بايوتيك ثيرابي. ايه لازمه الانتي بايوتيك؟ ان هي تعمل eradication للاوفر جروث، resolve and improve GI symptoms of these patients. Most favored antibiotics include rifaximin, metronidazole, ciprofloxacin أو الأموكسيسيلين كلافيرينيد. الduration typically 7 to 10 days، بس ممكن تبقى أكتر up to 1 to 2 months. أهم حاجة في الانتيبيوتكس دي إن هو أنا مش عالجت الكوز، فبالتالي هو هيحصل recurrence للسيبو، فهيحصل مع الوقت resistance of antibiotics. فبالتالي البكتيريا resistance دي هنتغلب عليها ازاي؟ ان احنا نعمل rotation of several antibiotics, cycling of several antibiotics until improvement of symptoms is observed. وكأي antibiotic بيبقى فيه adverse effects، GI symptoms برضو diarrhea، وممكن طبعا الكلوستريديوم ديفيسيل infection ان هي يحصل لها over growth، والبكتيريا ريزيستنس زي ما اتكلمنا عليها. بالنسبه للنيوتريشنال سبورت هم حاجتين، اللو فات مابس دايت، وديت واخدها فيري لو كواليتي ايفيدنس. وفي نيوتريشنال انترفنشنز كتيره في السيبو، بس هي اكتر حاجه خدت ريكومنديشن هي اللو فود مابس دايت. وتاني حاجة هعملها هي replacement of deficient nutrients عشان الناس دي بتعاني من malabsorption. اللو فود مابس دايت هي mainly كانت للاي بي اس خلاص، وهي عباره عن ايه؟ ان هي بتلمت الفود اللي فيها لاكتوز، فركتوز، فركتو اوليجوساكرايدز اللي هي الفراكتانز او الجلاكتانز او البوليلز والشوجر الكحول زي السوربيتول والمانيتول اند سو اون. فدول بيعملوا ايه؟ الشورت تشين كربوهيدرات ديت هي بولي ابزوربت، وبالتالي هي تعتبر سبستريت للبكتيريا وهايلي اوزموتيك، فبتدينا فيرمنتيشن عالي جدا، وهتحصل يعني تبقى مور اجريفيشن للسيمبتومز وجاز برودكشن وبين ودايريا. طيب النيوتريشن انترفنشن دي هتبدا ازاي؟ ان احنا نعمل اليمينيشن للهاي فود مابس فود. هي في ابلكيشنز كتيره وفي يعني ليست كتيره للفود مابس موجوده اونلاين، بيقول لك ايه هي الهاي وايه هي اللو وايه هي الميديوم، والبيشنت بيمشي عليها ان هو بيافويد او بيإليمينيت الهاي فود مابس فود from a diet for period تقريبا 6 weeks لغايه ممكن يعني هو غالبا العيان ده بيحصل له تحسن improve الجي اي symptoms في خلال اسبوعين من الإليمينيشن. بعد كده بيدخل على الفيز اللي بعدها اللي هو reintroduction، ورينترودكشن فيز دي بتبقى سلو كنترولد رينترودكشن ناخد 1 كاتيجوري من الفود ماب at that time، وبعدين بنobserve السيمبتومز ونشوف بعدها هي ايه التشالنج فود اللي هي عملت لنا سيمبتومز. في الاخر انا الهدف بتاعي مش ان انا كيور البيشنت، هو انا مش بعالج السبب، هو انا هنا بوصل ان مع العيان للموست توليرابل انتيك ليفل من الفود مابس، ويبقى انا كرييت ا دايت يبقى سيتبل للبيشنت يعيش عليها. بس ده بالنسبه لفكره الايه اللو فود مابس دايت. ريبليسمنت بقى للديفيشنت نيوترينتس هو مني فيتامين B12 زي ما قلنا، عشان هو بيبقى لوست في الفرمنتيشن وكونسيومد بالبكتيريا، او لو حصل بقى ان انا كمان عملت ريسكشن للتيرمينال ايليوم والإليوسيكال فالف وده المكان بتاع الابزوربشن. وبندي ساعتها روتين انتراماسكولار فيتامين بي 12. كمان بيبقى عندهم deficiency في الكالسيوم والايرون، فبندي لهم سبلمنت. الناس بقى دي اللي بتعاني من الفات مال ابزوربشن، وقلنا ازاي عشان حصل degradation للبايل سولتس، ان هي بيحصل لها deconjugation باي بكتيريا، فبالتالي بيحصل فات مال ابزوربشن. الناس دي اللي فاحنا بندي لهم ايه؟ بندي لهم الميديوم تشين ترايجليسرايدز. ايه الميديوم تشين ترايجليسرايدز دي؟ اللي هي ترايجليسرايدز الكربون فيها من 6 ل 12. بتختلف عن اللونج تشين فاتي اسيدز. ايه هي يعني اشمعنى هي تتاخد؟ لان هي موجوده فين ناتشرالي، ممكن زي الكوكونات اويل. طب ايه فايدتها؟ ان هي absorbed directly via the portal circulation. As we know الفاتس بتبقى absorbed للليمفاتيك، لكن هنا الميديوم تشين directly to the portal circulation، فبتبقى source للانرجي والليبيدز. تمام. طيب بندي كمان الفات سوليبل فيتامينز، وزي ما احنا واخدين بالنا كده انا مش كاتبه الكي، لان الفيتامين كي هي البكتيريا اصلا بتبروديوس الفيتامين كي، بيبقى mainly deficient فيتامين A D and E، فهنعمل لها supplementation. بس هي دي reference و thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ethar, for the very educational coverage and overview of the subject. That's a very interesting subject. And I believe that my friends and fellows and colleagues on the line are enjoying this very much as I did. In fact, I got some concerns with this issue. Your subject is an interesting point and mechanism that hides behind the real disease. We always diagnose in practice diseases, and we diagnose the clear problem on the surface, but things like bacterial overgrowth is in the shadow. It's in the back door. It's behind. It is always in the back door. We never see it. Nobody can see it. And I'll give you a good example in the IBS. We all agree that 75 to 80% of IBS patients do have short, small bowel overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth. I need to know, how do you see that? How can you tell the difference clinically to discriminate between the overlapping symptoms? Because we got a lot of symptom overlap between IBS and small bowel bacterial overgrowth.
Firstly, patients with small bowel bacterial overgrowth must have a risk factor for this. As we mentioned, the physiological.
So you will consider the risk. You will consider the predisposition and the risk.
Yes. It's very important to diagnose. We must evaluate these patients.
Exactly.
Not only rely on the GI symptoms. It's not specific.
Diagnostic. Yes.
Yes. This is first, and many studies mention that also patients with IBS improve with treatment of SIBO. We may try this antibiotic therapy with these patients, and they may improve. That may improve their symptoms.
So you're talking about therapeutic trials. In fact, small bowel bacterial overgrowth is something that you can verify and test, while IBS is something that you can never verify. It depends on your clinical impression. It's a symptom. It's all symptom itch and depends on the symptom scenario and Rome criteria and things like that. It's all clinically based, while bacterial overgrowth symptoms can be verified and tested. As you already mentioned, we can refer to tests to prove it, but there is no way to prove IBS. It's an exclusion diagnosis, basically. And the second thing, what is your recommendation to someone who has the short bowel bacterial overgrowth? The recommendations, what kind of practical recommendations? Giving antibiotics is an acute measure is a measure that you use on acute grounds. I mean the long-term grounds, because clearly bacterial overgrowth in the small bowel is something that recurs. It's a long-lasting problem. So what's the lifetime recommendation for those people?
I think dietary measures have a role. Yes, have a role.
Small meals, very small meals to help the traffic flowing faster and quicker. And low carbs. You already said it.
No,
low carbs.
Yes.
Very low carbs, because this is what bacteria loves. Bacteria love carbs and sugars. So let's recommend low carbs and high fibers and push probiotics. By the way, what do you think about probiotics in that issue?
Guidelines didn't didn't prove.
Inconclusive.
Oh, yes.
Inconclusive. It is always inconclusive. Absolutely. Yes. And I want you to recommend or remind your fellows and colleagues here with people at risk, who are the risky people for bacterial overgrowth syndrome, people at high risk. Elderly.
Yes, elderly patients have high risk patients with any motility disorder, diabetic patients, scleroderma, patients with hypothyroidism. All these patients have
high risk.
Yes.
What's the link? Do you see any link between bacterial overgrowth in the small bowel and obesity? Some reports talk about the association and link between obesity and bacterial overgrowth, small bowel.
Yes.
Do you see any link?
Yes. I know. There's a very high link between the microbiota, the composition, and the obesity or insulin resistance. Microbiota, a lot, high, very big issue.
Yes. Okay. Do we have any comments on this interesting subject and excellent teacher?
Next time, but I don't do it.
I would like to expand the discussion, and I'm very happy that you covered the nutritional part of the treatment and nutritional recommendations, because this would have upset a lot Professor Dua Zakaria. I'm very happy that you've taken care of that. You've taken care of the diet and nutritional recommendations.
I'm really interested.
We will always remember the small bowel bacterial overgrowth in the IBS patients and hypochlorhydria in people receiving proton pump inhibitors long-term, like reflux patients. We will always remember, yes, definitely, and Crohn's disease and people having stasis in the small bowel, those on sleeping pills and narcotics and drugs that depress motility, and people with a sluggish bowel for one reason or another, gastrectomy and autoimmune gastritis, and so on and so forth. We will always remember that those people are at high risk, and the elderly at high risk, and so on. Thank you, Dr. Ethar, again. We all enjoyed that very much. We enjoyed it very much, and thank you.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا لحضرتك يا دكتور على المناقشه الممتعه، يعني احنا بنستفيد من حضرتك، وطبعا دكتوره إثار يعني
ايوه، ما انا بقول لحضرتك
محاضره جميله، بس لا طبعا احنا بنستفيد من حضرتك والله يا دكتور هشام، يعني احنا بنستمتع بمناقشه حضرتك معانا.
بالعكس انا مستمتع اكتر.
ربنا يبارك في حضرتك يا دكتور. هو دكتور محمد النادري غالبا مش معانا يا دكتور، فيعني هستأذن حضرتك لو نقدم دكتور اسلام الشعراوي.
دكتور اسلام الشعراوي مش كده؟ is an engineer, yes?
Yes.
I understood he's an engineer and he has PhD in engineering.
Yes يا دكتور. هو ليكشر في بنها يونيفرسيتي، وهو المدير التنفيذي للمعلومات في جامعة بنها. هيكلمنا على الارتفيشال انتليجنس ابلكيشن in medical science.
So we should all be very careful, because this is the intelligence man in medicine, So we can be wired, we can be surveyed, everybody can be exposed in that lecture. So because this is the intelligence man, everybody is eager to know, to listen to that lecture.
Thank you
yes,
very much,
Dr.
Professor Hisham, and thank you very much, everybody, for this opportunity. And I hope that everyone will enjoy and benefit from this webinar. This is Islam Elshaarawy, CIO of Banha University and the Fellow of Higher Education Academy, United Kingdom. This webinar is a gentle introduction to the application of AI in medical science. Let me first ask you to kindly follow the link that I have just shared with you in Zoom chat in order to be able to interact with me during this webinar. You will be able to react to different slides, and you will be able to ask questions or post comments during this presentation. I'm using a Mentimeter, as you can see. Mentimeter will allow me to deliver my presentation slides and collect your reactions and feedback during this webinar. Let me start with this icebreaker. In your opinion, what does this slide refer to? If you like, you can unmute yourselves and respond using Zoom, or you can send your responses through Mentimeter.
I cannot touch any button here because if I touch anything, I will mess up the whole situation. I'm very bad in dealing with these machines. I got clear orders to sit silent and not to touch anything.
You, Professor Hisham, that by the end of this session, you will feel with artificial intelligence. This slide refers to precision medicine. Current medicine follows one treatment fits all. Future medicine will be more personalized. Precision medicine or personalized medicine is where every individual may receive different treatment depending on blood, DNA, urine, and tissue analysis. Indeed, precision medicine is one of the most important applications of AI in medical sciences. This is my agenda for today. Definitions followed by approaches and techniques, and I will tell you the secret ingredient of artificial intelligence. Then I will show you a very powerful tool which does not require any coding. It does not require programming. You do not have to be programmer, computer scientist, nor computer engineer to build artificial intelligence. And this tool is free, yet it is priceless. And I will show you one complete example step by step. Then I will show some brief examples about the applications of artificial intelligence in medical science. And I will propose the next steps that you can follow in order to be able to integrate AI into your own research. And finally, I will collect your feedback. What to expect by the end of this session. By the end of this webinar, I promise everyone that he or she will be able to you will be AI literate or AI ready. You will be able to define AI. You will be able to identify AI use cases and build AI systems and apply AI in medical sciences. I know that this may be too good, but I promise you that it is true. So what is the trick? Can everyone really build AI? The answer is yes, but with the right tool. The tool that I will present today is very easy and accessible to anyone and does not require any background in computer science or artificial intelligence. But what is artificial intelligence? Indeed, there is no agreed definition of artificial intelligence. And there is no even agreed definition of intelligence itself. So aside from the different definitions of artificial intelligence, we can safely define artificial intelligence as the ability of machines to make the appropriate selection. So if you are able to build a machine that makes the appropriate selection, we can call this machine an intelligent machine. Let's take, for example, tic-tac-toe game. If you can build a machine that plays tic-tac-toe by selecting the appropriate cell in each turn, then you can claim that this machine can select the appropriate cell. Typically, AI uses exhaustive search. So in this example, the machine enumerates all possible moves ahead and selects the move that results in win. The same applies to chess, and the same concept was applied by IBM to build Deep Blue, the machine that was able to defeat Garry Kasparov in 1997, was the world champion, and this was
Russian
the first
hero.
time. Yeah, exactly, Professor Shan. Unfortunately, this was not possible in another game like Go. Go was too difficult for machines to play in the same way like tic-tac-toe and chess. Enumerating all possible moves was not possible in Go because the number of possible moves was too big to be enumerated by machines. And this was a turning point in which we had to employ machine learning. What is machine learning? Machine learning is the ability of machines to learn how to make the appropriate selection without being explicitly taught how to pick the appropriate selection. So in chess and tic-tac-toe, machines were taught how to make the appropriate selection by enumerating possible selections and selecting the most promising one. And in chess, machines were taught to prune or eliminate some selections from the early beginning and select the most appropriate one. In Go, machines were taught by examples, hundreds or thousands of Go games. The machines were able to learn how to make the appropriate selection directly from data. And this takes us to the secret ingredient of AI. The secret ingredient of AI is data. And let's take another real life example. Iris flowers. Assume that we have two different species of iris flowers, Iris setosa and Iris versicolor. If we have an expert, Khabir, who can classify iris to Iris setosa or Iris versicolors. Unfortunately, this expert is no longer available. Can we learn from the expert historical decisions in order to be able to classify future flowers? The same concept applies to benign or malignant tumors. And the same concept applies to the classification or the diagnosis of any other disease. It's the same concept. So if we were able to learn how Iris setosa and Iris versicolors can be classified based on historical data, then we can apply the same concept to any other data set in the medical application. Simply, we need to build a data set in which we collect, and in front of these properties, we write down the expert decision. So for example, flower number 1, we have 2 properties of this flower, and we have the expert decision. Flower number 2, flower number 3, and so forth. So we have historical data annotated by human expert. Can we learn from this data in order to be able to classify future flowers in which the expert decision is not available? Let's try to visualize these historical decisions. As you can see, plotting the sepal length against the sepal width shows this diagram. Versicolor flowers are encoded with blue color, and the setosa colors are encoded with yellow color. Let me ask you one question. If we have a new flower in which the width and height are located here, should you classify this flower as iris versicolor or iris setosa? You are not expert, but you can rely on the historical data. Exactly, it should be classified as versicolor. This can be decided easily by looking at the neighborhood of this sample or at this decision boundary. So we have different techniques to classify a new sample. So if it is malignant and benign, we can decide which class this sample should be classified to depending on the historical data that are collected from human experts. But why to use AI if classification is as simple as visualization on a 2D plan? Why AI is needed? It seems that simple statistical methods or simple graphical based methods can solve such problems. AI is required when the dimensionality is very high, when we are not looking at only 2 attributes, we are looking at very huge number of attributes, very huge number of features. In this case, statistical methods fails, and looking at 2D graphs will not give us any clue. So we have to use AI techniques. Now, what is the tool that we can use to achieve? What are the tools that we can use to achieve this system, AI system that can learn from historical data? The tool is orange data mining. And it is very simple tool that does not require any coding or programming. And it works by drag and drop and connecting some nodes together. I will show you now in few minutes that you can build the AI system as long as you have the only secret or no longer secret ingredient, which is the data. If you have data set, you can download Orange, install it, and build the AI system to learn from your historical data that you collected during clinical trials or whatever. Then the AI system can be used to make future predictions. My philosophy here is Pareto principle. I will allow you with only 20% of effort to cover 80% of AI applications in medical sciences. Only with 20% of effort. You need only to learn Orange. Orange is a very simple tool. And once you have any historical data, you can use Orange to build AI systems. The dataset that we will use now is breast cancer from Wisconsin University. This dataset is very popular, and there are a lot of publications out there on this dataset. More than 5,000 publications, according to Google Scholar, used breast cancer Wisconsin dataset. And for your information, more than 6 the simple tool that I will introduce in the next few minutes. Let me open Orange. As soon as I open Orange, I can select to create a new project. I can drag and drop from the toolbar the tools that I need. I need to start with my data. So I drag the file widget. I double click the file widget and I select the dataset. Orange comes with a set of built-in datasets for you to play with, and you can browse and many formats like CSV and Microsoft Excel and many other formats. It can even connect to database if you are working in a hospital that uses SQL or whatever database. So I selected the file and I will play with the built-in iris dataset. Now I can drag one more widget for visualization from here, or I can just drag from the file widget and release the mouse, and it will propose different widgets that can be connected to file. I select data table, double click the data table widget, and it will show me all the historical data to make sure that the data is loaded appropriately. Then I can select and add visualization widget like scatter plot, and it immediately plots 3 classes, iris setosa, versicolor, and virginica, and I can choose one of the 4 attributes on x-axis and one of the 4 attributes on y-axis, and I see the scatter plot. Now I want to build a classifier that is able to classify the iris flower based on the width and height of sepal and the petal. I can do this simply by dragging and selecting one of the many classifiers that are rendered in pink. For example, I can use logistic regression. Logistic regression widget will build the logistic regression model, which is one of the tools that AI uses. I can use many other tools like decision tree, like k-nearest neighbor, like naive Bayes, like neural networks. Now I need to evaluate my model. So I can choose test and score, and immediately I get different metrics like area under the curve, like classification accuracy, F-score, precision, and recall of this model. And I can export this model, and I can use this model for making future prediction. I have already prepared a more complex model to demonstrate to you how powerful Orange is. Let me open my model, please. This example. In this example, I dragged many widgets like k-nearest neighbor, support vector machines, logistic regression, naive Bayes, neural networks, decision trees, and I connected all of them to test and score widget, and I collected all of them to prediction widget. I also splitted the data into training data and directed them to build the models, and another part of the data to test. So I have to test the model with a data in which was not used for building the model. Now, when I double click the test underscore widget, I get the evaluation results of all the models, the k-nearest neighbor, decision tree, support vector machines, and so on. As you can see, logistic regression resulted in 95% accuracy. Neural networks resulted in 93%, and other models resulted in 91% accuracy. So as you can see, the model that is shown in front of you managed to classify iris flowers with accuracy more than 90%. Now, I want to use this model to classify cancer to benign and malignant. In your opinion, how long does it take to migrate this model from iris flowers to breast cancer? I just need a couple of clicks on this file and everything will change. I double click the file widget and select different data set, breast cancer, Wisconsin data set. And immediately everything propagates through this data flow model. And now I can see the data of breast cancer, like clump thickness, like uniform cell size, like uniform cell shape, marginal adhesions, and so on. Based on these different measures, I was able to build the different machine learning models that results in very high classification accuracy, 99 and 97% classification accuracy. I was able to use machine learning to learn how to classify a sample based on 9 attributes into benign or malignant using a very simple tool, as you can see. Here you are more examples in which orange was used. So all these examples are based only on orange: clinical decision making, data mining and decision support in medical applications, hyperspectral data, classification of dengue fever, breast cancer, early detection, hepatitis C prediction, RNA, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, COVID. So, and hundreds of examples in which orange is applied to historical data related to one of the fields of medical sciences, and we were able to build decision support systems or classifiers or early detection systems and so on. What are the next steps? The next steps is either to go and take classroom training of orange and pay a lot of money in euro or USD, or follow these links in front of you. These links are for complete courses of orange delivered in different places like Baylor College of Medicine. When you follow one of these links, you will find all the material. As you can see, full lectures, full homework, and video lectures for step-by-step usage of orange. Also, let's collaborate. You can scan this QR code, and this will add my contact to your smartphone, and we can arrange for collaborative research where I can provide the AI support from my side, and you can deliver the data and provide the subject matter from your side. Please let me know what you think about today's session by rating every aspect in front of you, by following the link that I shared with you in Zoom chat, and let me know if you have any suggestions for improving this webinar. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Islam, for this presentation. And I believe that our lecturers, assistant professors, and residents who are part of what you have been saying will enjoy that definitely, and they will share it with you. But as for me, I need a lot of artificial intelligence to open my own phone and close it and answer, and even to answer to and respond to WhatsApp. It takes me a lot of artificial intelligence. So I'm also waiting, just as you are, for any comments from my friends and fellows here on the line.
مساء الخير جميعا. مساء الخير يا فندم. أنا الحقيقة عاوزة أقول إن دي very special scientific meeting of TMASU بوجود أستاذنا أستاذ الدكتور هشام دبوس معانا النهاردة. والحقيقة very special scientific meeting و very special بالسبيشال تو سبيكرز النهاردة الدكتورة إيثار والدكتور إسلام. وحقيقة يعني طبعا احنا اتشرفنا بيهم وساعدنا بيهم، بس طبعا في صعوبة طبعا زي ما قال الأستاذ الدكتور هشام بالنسبة لنا احنا في استيعاب الارتفيشال انتليجنس، لكن أكيد
not for you not for you
لكن اكيد طبعا يعني هي محتاجين اكتر، محتاجين نفهم اكتر، محتاجين مور ليكتشرز. دكتور اسلام اذا كان فعلا الموضوع ده هيفيدنا في الكلينيكال براكتس وفي الميديكال ساينس. بشكركم جدا وبشكر استاذي الاستاذ الدكتور هشام دبوس على وجوده اصلا معانا النهارده.
شرف كبير. I enjoyed it very much.
أنا هستأذن حضرتك يا دكتور، كانت دكتورة نورهان عايزة تسأل سؤال.
أيوة، أهلا وسهلا.
اتفضلي يا دكتور نورهان.
مساء الخير، ازي حضرتك يا دكتور هشام؟ حضرتك منورنا جدا بجد والله.
الله يخليك يا دكتورة نورهان، أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا بحضرتك. أولا طبعا بنشكر تامسو تيم بصراحة، يعني محاضرات فوق الرائعة وويفز يعني جميلة، وويش مور سكسس إن شاء الله. هو بس كومنت. أيوة. كان طبعا هي دكتور إيثار محاضرة رائعة جدا.
صحيح.
هي بس بالنسبة لي البرو والبريبايوتكس هي inconclusive بس promising.
Yes, definitely. I'm using it personally with IBS patients who are distended and so on. I'm personally using it. Yes.
بالذات الاي بي اس، لان في جراي زون ما بين السيبو ما بين الاي بي اس زي ما وضحت الدكتور، وخصوصا النوع اللي هو الفيوزي فورم بكتيريا وباسيلس، وكانوا بيلعبوا على الكولوني فورمينج يونتس بريشيو معينه، بيقولوا ان هي ليها رول. البوينت الثانيه الاوبيزيتي، طبعا ده بيج ايشو زي ما دكتور إيثار قالت، خصوصا بيبقى فيه حاجات اللي هم بيبقى جانك فود، وبيبقى فيه بيطلع الاسيتالدهايد، بيعملوا حاجات زي البامس والدامس، ودي بتعمل ديسبيوزس.
That disturbs the microbiome. It disturbs very much the microbiome environment.
وخصوصا لو في ريسك فاكتور انسولين ريزيستنس، وهي نفسها ممكن تعمل انسولين ريزيستنس، وبتدخل بقى في ايشوز كبيره جدا، يعني مش قصه بس سيبو كده، لا ده الموضوع كبير يعني. بس شكرا.
Thank you so much يا دكتورة نورهان.
عفوا حضرتك.
Thank you so much. شكرا يا دكتورة نورهان. شكرا.
لو تسمح لي دكتور أحمد أجاوب على السؤالين، لازم أمشي عشان عندي ميتنج تاني، أنا آسف.
اتفضل يا دكتور إسلام، اتفضل.
السؤال الأولاني: Can we use our old patients data to predict future occurrences؟ الإجابة نعم. يعني هو ده أساساً الماشين ليرنينج، إن أنا أستفيد من الهيستوريكال داتا بتاعت الأولد بيشنتس وبريدكت بيها future occurrences، أو أقدر إن أنا diagnose بيها future occurrences. السؤال الثاني: Can it help with the statistical analysis of already collected data؟ الإجابة برضو نعم. لو أنا عندي historical data جمعتها وعملت عليها statistical analysis وحتى نشرتها، ممكن نعمل revamping للاناليسيز اللي اتعملت، وندخل حاجه من الاي اي ونعيد نشر الكلام ده تاني، ونشوف هل الاي اي قدر يطلع انسايتس ما قدرتش الاستاتستيكال اناليسيس تطلعها ولا لا. شاكر جدا لحضراتكم.
حلو، فكرة بحث حلوة.
طب معلش، هي النقطة الأخرانية دي محتاجة توضيح شوية يعني.
هو النقطة الأخرانية حضرتك إن لو أنا عندي بحث أنا نشرته وعملت بيه statistical analysis ب SPSS أو whatever.
تمام.
دلوقتي ال AI ممكن يساعدني في حاجة. ممكن نفس الهيستوريكال داتا دي أجيبها أحطها على أورنج، أبلاي ديفرنت ماشين ليرنينج تكنيكس وأشوف ممكن أطلع انسايتس أنا ما قدرتش أشوفها بالستاتستيكال أناليسيز اللي أنا عملتها، وأقدر أفيريفاي الانسايتس دي في الهيستوريكال داتا، فأقدر أعمل بابليكيشن تانية وأقول إن استخدام الماشين ليرنينج أو استخدام أورنج أو استخدام الارتفيشال انتليجنس على الداتا الفلانية وراني انسايتس تانية.
اوكي.
هو هسألك بس يا دكتور اسلام سؤال معلش قبل ما تسيبنا. هو اعتقد ده هيبقى السؤال عند الناس كلها، ايه الفرق بين الاستاتستيكال اناليسيز العادي والارتفيشال انتليجنس؟ يعني هو ايه الفرق، المعادلات والحاجات اللي بتتعمل في الاستاتستيكال اناليسيز والارتفيشال انتليجنس ابلكيشن؟
هو الارتفيشال انتليجنس one of its tools is statistical analysis, statistical tools. لكن في تولز ثانيه بيستخدمها الاي اي. للاسف الاستاتستيكال تولز مش هتقدر تهندل غير عدد ليميتد من الفيتشرز من الكولومز وعدد ليميتد من الروز من الريكوردز، ومش هتقدر تكابتشر الكومبلكس ريليشنز ما بين الاتريبيوتس دي. انما الاي اي بيستخدم مور سوفيستيكيتد تكنيكس، بيستخدم فيتشر سيلكشن تكنيكس، بيستخدم سامبلنج تكنيكس، بيستخدم حاجه زي الديب ليرنينج او النيورال نتوركس. التكنيكس دي بتسمح لي ان انا اهندل الكومبلكس ريليشنز او الديبندنسيز او الكوريليشنز ما بين الاتريبيوتس وبعضها. فالناس اللي بتستخدم statistical analysis ده كويس، بس ليها ليميتيشنز، مش هتقدر تشوف كل الانسايتس. انما باستخدام الاي اي زي النيورال نتوركس او الديب ليرنينج او وات ايفر، لا ممكن يبقى في علاقات موجوده في الداتا ومش واضحه للستاتستيكال تولز.
تمام، تسلم ايدك يا دكتور اسلام. هستأذنك بس في اللينك بتاع حضرتك على الشات، عشان احنا بقى في الكيو ار كود والكلام ده على قدنا خالص. فاللينك بس كده عشان لو حد عايز يتواصل مع حضرتك في يعني كاستفسار او اي كوبريشن بقى ان شاء الله باذن الله.
تمام دكتور احمد، وشاكر جدا لحضراتكم.
احنا يعني سعدنا بحضراتكم النهارده.
أيوة.
استاذنا الاستاذ الدكتور هشام دبوس، يعني اللي بنتعلم منه
يا حبيبي
كل
العافية
حاجه،
العافية
مش
يا
العلم
حبيبي.
بس.
ده شرف
يعني
كبير، ده شرف
ربنا
كبير.
يبارك
بس
في
لما
حضرتك
تقول يا
دكتور.
دكتور احمد ان حضرتك عندك صعوبة، امال هاو دو اي فيل؟ امال انا اقول ايه؟
لا يعني هو الموضوع طبعا يا دكتور هو كومبليكيتد شويه، بس يعني احنا حاولنا النهارده ان احنا ايه يعني نلقي الضوء عليه، لان فعلا في استاديز كتير شفناها اتعملت في الارتفيشال انتليجنس، ويمكن يعني في جزء كبير مننا ما يعرفش استخدامه ايه او بيتعمل ازاي، فقلنا يعني نتكلم عليه النهارده، نلقي الضوء عليه. فيعني ان شاء الله نستفيد من اليوم النهارده. وبشكر استاذنا الدكتوره اميره طبعا.
تجربه عمليه، يعني محتاجين حاجه عمليه بقى. حاجه مش هينفع زوم في الموضوع ده، محتاجين تجربه عمليه، اكزامبلز يشرح لنا ازاي نطبق فعلا الكلام ده، او ازاي نعمل استادي بالكلام ده فعلا. فدي حاجه بقى
اي ثينك يا دكتور، يعني ان شاء الله باذن الله زي ما حضرتك بتقولي كده نحاول نجرب في حاجه ونشوف هنستفيد منها ايه.
يعني هو يكون معانا موجود بقى، يعني حاجه قدامنا، حاجه ريال بقى، يعني واخد بالك، انما مش هينفع تيتشنج زوم بس، عاوز يعمل لنا اكزامبل عملي وننفذه.
تمام حضرتك يا دكتور، تمام.
مره ثانيه بقى ان شاء الله.
ان شاء الله ان شاء الله. وطبعا بشكر دكتوره ايثار بقى يعني على المحاضره القيمه، ويعني وسايب لحضرتك بقى لو حضرتك عندك اي تعليق يا دكتور هشام، حضرتك اتفضل عشان ايه ننهي اليوم النهارده ان شاء الله باذن الله.
ده شرف كبير وكان وقت رائع الحقيقه، ويا رب نكررها تاني. يعني this should be very often and very frequent, especially الحاجات اللي لها practical implications زي الاي بي اس والاوفر بوبوليشن اوف بكتيريا ان ذا جات والحاجات دي كلها. يعني كل ما كانت امور اوف براكتيكال ابلكيشن تبقى احسن لينا للبراكتيشنرز لينا كلنا، ونعمل لها جروب ديسكشن كده اون ذا لاين، يبقى كويس قوي. حتى لو كان نقدر to incorporate some live cases يعني من حالاتنا اللي احنا بنقابلها. فيا رب نتقابل دايما على خير على طول.
السلام عليكم دكتور هشام، وسعدنا جدا ان انت معانا، وربنا يبارك فيك ويحفظك ويحفظك ويبارك طبعا في كل الشباب، ربنا يحفظهم جميعا. حقيقه قايمين بجهد رائع،
اكيد
يعني فعلا وجودك معانا مهم جدا، وان شاء الله تبقى معانا على طول يعني. الله يكرمك يا هشام. شكرا لكل الشباب والدكتوره إيثار، ربنا يبارك فيك يا رب. اما بقى المحاضره اللي صعبه علينا فربنا ييسر لنا بقى ونفهمها.
ايوه
ربنا يبارك فيك جميعا وما يحرمناش منكم. شكرا، السلام عليكم.
شكرا يا فندم، مع السلامه يا فندم.
شكرا لحضرتك يا دكتور، شكرا لحضراتكم جميعا، ونلقاكم على خير.